I am Dr. C.H. Lakshmi Kumari, working as Assistant Professor at Institute of Public Enterprises. Today we will discuss about the sectoral classification of state-level public enterprises in India. We will deal here about their genesis, growth and background of these public sector enterprises at state level, and also the framework on which these enterprises are classified into various sectors. We will discuss about the sectoral classification here because it is becoming difficult to analyze the performance of state level public enterprises when it is viewed in totality. This approach does not help the policy makers in finding out the causes responsible for the suboptimal performance of these enterprises. Therefore, it is felt necessary that state level public enterprises need to be unbundled and divided into certain homogeneous groups in order to research whether all sorts of state level public enterprises have been incurring losses or earning profits, or the problem of loss making or profit earning enterprises have different dimensions in the case of various groups of the state level public enterprises. An unbundling of state level public enterprises in this manner is likely to help the policy makers further in prioritizing a plan of action for the restructuring and development of these enterprises. It is likely to help in segregating the more important SLPEs for the less important ones and provide a signal as to which group of SLPEs deserves the attention of the policy makers on the basis of their socio-economic and political relevance. Mainly, the classification of these SLPEs was done by various people, but here we will see how this classification was done before and which type of classification was preferred today. They have developed various frameworks for this classification of these public sector enterprises. For this, various committees were also formed. The policy writings on these state level public enterprises and the research efforts originating in academic quarters and policy making organs lack the rigor of classifying the state level public enterprises into certain cognizant groups. Because of these, efforts have been problem specific and therefore did not make any attempt to classify the SLPs to comprehend the dynamics of their performance as influenced by the internal and external factors like varying in size, nature, product mix, and divergence in their objectives. The State Bureau of Public Enterprises, which looks after the activities of the state level public enterprises in various state governments, have done the classification. However, the stand taken by this bureau has not been consistent, as they have categorized these SLPs in their respective states in terms of their location under the various state ministries or departments, socio-economic functions, and the nature of activities performed by them. The policy makers made the first effort in this direction in the Kapoor Committee report on the state level public enterprises submitted to the Ministry of Home Affairs in 1974. H.K.L. Kapoor, the then Chief Secretary from Government of Gujarat, headed this committee along with the nominees of the government and some chiefs of state level public enterprises from various state governments. The 7th Finance Commission mentioned the need for the SLPEs to earn the rate of return. If categorized these SLPEs as departmental and non-departmental enterprises and studied their performance based on profit earning record, it was not satisfied with the suggested optimal rate of return that the SLP should have earned as part and parcel of the various categories. The 8th and 9th Finance Commission devoted their entire mind to this complex problem. They suggested a 5-fold categorization of SLPEs to develop the targeted rate of returns which these enterprises to develop. They divided the SLPEs into 5 categories: manufacturing, service, trade and promotion, financial and welfare enterprises. Finally, an attempt was made to divide the SLPs into three categories, namely commercial, commercial cum promotional, and promotional enterprises, with a suggestion to earn a rate of return of 7.5% for commercial, 5% for commercial and promotional, and 2.5% for commercial enterprises. For 2.5% for promotional enterprises to earn this percentage rate of return. A conceptual framework was developed for this rate of return. This 7.5% per annum rate of return on their capital employed has been suggested for the commercial enterprises, which are mainly involved in undertaking manufacturing and allied operations. This is done mainly to provide enough leverage for sustenance, declaring their dividends, and going in for expansion. The commercial cum promotional enterprises are categorized by two polar extremes. On the one hand, they are involved in executing commercial functions, and on the other, they are mandated to fulfill promotional obligations. It was therefore suggested a rate of return of 5% per annum to be earned on their capital employed, of which 2.5% should be used for sustenance and the rest for remunerating the owners by way of providing dividends to them. If the state governments are interested in their expansion, they should extend the funding for this purpose. The promotional enterprises discharge social obligations of the government. These enterprises do not undertake activities with profit making as their main goal. It is suggested that they should earn a maximum of 2.5% per annum as the rate of return on capital employed. This should allow them to sustain their operations in the long run. It would, however, not provide for funds to declare dividends and go in for expansion. The state government would have to forego dividends and provide funds to them for the purpose of expansion. The conceptual framework of this type of on rate of return to be earned by these three types of SLPEs is innovative in many regards. Firstly, it takes into consideration the commercial and the social aspect of the functioning of state-level public enterprises. Secondly, it encourages a classification of these enterprises along with the lines of it provides a basis for suggesting a realistic framework of rate of return to be earned by these enterprises. First, we will see how these commercial enterprises will function. The commercial enterprises forms an important component of the SLPEs in the Indian system. In terms of number, they account for nearly 50% strength of these enterprises. In terms of coverage, the same percentage of these enterprises have responded also. This includes electronic industries, textile industries, mining, drugs and pharmaceutical, sugar, cement sector enterprises. All these enterprises that fall into the operation of these type of activities are under commercial enterprises. The telecommunication enterprises also find a place in this category only. Most of these enterprises are in competitive sector. A study of the working of these enterprises has gained importance in the present context today, as most of the state governments are thinking about their public enterprises portfolios. The general consensus is in favor of giving up such enterprises which have constantly making profits. On the other, there is a great deal of unanimity on the issue of winding up or privatizing such enterprises which have been consistently incurring losses and whose net worth has been eroded considerably due to accumulation of losses. The major objectives of these enterprises are filling up the entrepreneurial gap caused by the private sector in various states, undertaking capital-intensive and risk-prone industrial activities wherein private enterprises cannot chip in, supplanting the efforts of the private sector in the industrial development of the states, exploiting technology advantages in favor of states in areas of high-tech base, operating monopoly business in the state sector, and generating surplus for the planned development of the states and for their own growth. The major issues and problems that these enterprises are facing pertains to site selection, purchase of plant and machinery, effective project implementation, high cost, overmining, and excessive interest burden. They had a very poor marketing image. The marketing department did not exist in this type of enterprises, and salesperson lacked the requisite drive and initiative. They lacked commercialization as they did not develop appropriate pricing and controlling mechanisms. They were also weak on corporatizing as they lacked adequate management information systems, internal audit, and budgeting. The government state level public enterprise relationship was such as not to permit adequate operational freedom to these enterprises. That is the major reason for the most of these state level public enterprises for running into losses. No joint venture existed in the case of these enterprises. The R&D departments were not more active. The workforce, including executives at different levels, did not have the opportunity to develop themselves to get trained in the new vistas of technology developments. Though many of these states had Bureau of Public Enterprises, they did not provide training facilities, even though the training facilities that are provided by these departments are not sufficient in the present day competitive market. Long delays were a common feature of the accounting system. The valuation of the assets was not done from time to time. The working capital imbalances did not allow these enterprises to maximize their output. Another common feature of these enterprises was that they did not develop new ideas and solely depend on the financial support from their respective state governments. They need to develop the funding on their own in the present day context. Though many states could not be benefited by drawing upon the experiences of other states in running similar enterprises, hardly any attempt was made in this direction by any of the enterprises in any state. Commercial promotional enterprises. The major scope of the commercial promotional enterprises is that these enterprises are characterized by twin elements of business, that is, they blend a mix of commercial and promotional goals directing their functioning. Their commercial goals force them to go in for profit earning, and their promotional goals lead them to execute economic activities at the behest of the government on profit or no profit basis. These enterprises include the state level public enterprises that are dealing with dairy development, fisheries development, infrastructure development, industrial development, financial development, leather industries, civil supplies, essential commodities, housing, etc. They are different from commercial enterprises in terms of restrictions placed on their latitude to fix prices for their services and their products. We will see their genesis and growth. Most of these enterprises were set up between 50s and 70s only. The State Financial Corporation Act was passed in 1950. Accordingly, various state financial corporations were established across almost all the states in India. 22 such corporations have been set up in the country. They have become an important component of the development banking system in the country. Leading states such as Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh have seen their state financial corporation exceeding the sanction and disbursement targets. The state financial corporations concern themselves with the financing of small units. The Industrial Development Corporation in the country set up between 50s and 70s to promote the establishment of medium and large scale industrial units. Across the countries, the infrastructure corporations across the states have been set up to develop and promote infrastructural facilities for industrial development in various states. These are now expected to play a very important role in the development of infrastructure in almost all the states. The housing corporations have been set up under different names in various states. with the objective of removing housing shortages in the country. There are states where massive housing programs are underway, being handled by housing corporations, housing boards, police housing corporations, housing for weaker sections of the community, etc. Food security is a major problem for any developing economy. One of the aspects of the food security is an efficient and effective distribution. For this, the state governments have established civil supplies corporations across various state governments, and the essential commodities corporations have set up in the various states to help the Food Corporation of India in the procurement and disbursement of the food grains, and they operate as a lifeline for the distributional network of food grains under the control of various state governments. The leather industries development corporations were established to help the small cobblers by making adequate provisions for extending financial support to them as well as helping them in marketing their products. In terms of responses, a heavy concentration of such enterprises have been found in relation to Andhra Pradesh, Assam, Gujarat, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu and Punjab. These states used the instrument of state-level public enterprises as a public policy to achieve both the commercial and non-commercial goals. The major objectives of these commercial promotional enterprises are marketing of goods produced by some producers, undertaking production of perishable and durable consumable items, removing poverty, unemployment, and strengthening the economic base of producers by providing financial assistance, modernizing their production, organization, and marketing of their products, achieving economy in execution of construction works, accelerating the rate of industrialization in various states, removing regional imbalances in the industrial development of the states, promoting the growth of tiny, small, and medium industries, and formulating programs for proper utilization of resources. The major issues, problems, and challenges that these commercial promotional enterprises are facing are: first one is lack of vision. As these enterprises were involved in diverse activities, they failed to develop a vision governing their business operations. This brought complacency and resulted in wastage. Another important problem that these enterprises are facing is absence of business systems. These enterprises had not installed certain basic business systems. They did not have a comprehensive personnel policy, which was pivotal to the success of their efficient functioning, as they required personnel having attributes to appreciate the business purpose of these enterprises on the one hand and their social goals on the other. Their marketing departments in particular were not staffed with personnel having a sensitization of social marketing. Their internal audit systems, budgetary controls, and account keeping was in a very poor shape. This need to be upgraded immediately in order to compete in the market. Next one is low utilization of resources. Capacities installed were utilized very inadequately. The turnover of capital employed ratio was very much less than 1:1. In fact, in enterprises such as Dairy Development Corporation or Leather Development Corporation, there was no reason that this ratio should have been that low. Another feature or the problem that these enterprises are facing is duplication of activities. In many states, more than one SLPE was engaged in the same activity. The study reveals that in housing, there were as many as 4 to 5 corporations engaged in the various states. In some states, in the field of forestry also, there were many enterprises working for the same goal. There is a need to remove this duplication. Over dependence on the government and poor government enterprise interface. These enterprises depend heavily on the state support, which is against the spirit of the purpose for which these enterprises were set up. It was expected that they would subsidize the cost of their social obligations by effective management of their commercial activities. However, in practice, they lost both of these things. As they had a mixed bag of objectives, the government enterprise relationship in these SLPs was not very smooth. No effort was made to develop parameters in order to strengthen the relationship between this government and enterprise. Therefore, an efficient system should be introduced in order to strengthen the relationship between the government and enterprises at the state level. Next one is promotional enterprises. These enterprises are public units operating at the state level to undertake promotional activities of the various state governments on a commercial and corporate basis. In the case of these enterprises, promotion is the primary objective and profit earning become a secondary objective. In the process of fulfilling their primary objective, these enterprises should not incur losses. In other words, mainly these enterprises must discharge their obligations on the basis of the principle of break-even and not incur any financial loss. These enterprises include in their ambit the Women Development Corporation, Scheduled Caste Development Corporation, Scheduled Tribe Financial Development Corporation, Handicap Development Corporation, Area Development Boards and Authorities, and Minority Development Corporations. As promotion is the primary objective of these enterprises, they need to promote the welfare of the people through these corporations. The growth and development of these enterprises should be funded by the respective state governments since they are not working for the profit motive. Therefore, the budgetary support to 100% extent need to be provided by their respective state governments because these enterprises are working for the welfare of the people. Now we will see what are the major issues, challenges and problems that these enterprises are facing. The states which have used promotional enterprises as an instrumentality of development and implementation of the public policy are Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Maharashtra, Tripura, Karnataka, Punjab and Uttar Pradesh. The states where the response rate has exceeded the national average are Goa, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, Maharashtra and Punjab. The various state governments between the 1950s and the early 70s had initiated a number of welfare activities for discharging their obligations in this regard. These state governments had set up special departments. It was found that departmentalization of such activities deprived the various state governments of the advantages of obtaining long-term and short-term finances from the development banks, commercial banks and global sources. It was observed that the bureaucratic style of the functioning of the government prevailing in the various departments of Central Secretariat affected the smooth functioning of such departments in charge of carrying out these important welfare programs and activities of the government in total. Among the major problems faced by the departmental operations to execute their activities were lack of cost consciousness and non-adherence to the time schedules. Bunk passing emerged to be another major handicap. All these reasons cumulated into the setting up of special breed of SLPEs to handle the promotional activities of various state-level public enterprises. Therefore, in the later part of 1970 and 1980, most of the states used the company form of organizations to carry out their promotional activities. However, in the case of some states, the cooperative form of organizations also have been adopted. The government of Gujarat has taken the lead in this movement. Now we will see what are the major objectives for establishing these type of enterprises. They mainly aim at the promotion of economic activities through encouraging private entrepreneurs by their direct involvement, acting as nodal agencies in their area of operations, charged with the responsibility of preparing and implementing the plan for the development of respective activities assigned to them, and again carrying out commercial activities as and when required or assigned to them, but only on a pre-functionary basis as profit earning is applied as a secondary criteria to evaluate their performance. Now we will see what are the major problems and challenges that these enterprises are facing. These enterprises had a very weak middle management. The chairman cum managing director, vice chairman cum managing director were supported by the junior functionaries as managers or senior managers, or the middle level people posts are vacant for long period, and it provides to be difficult for these enterprises to attract managers to man such posts. The top management in these enterprises suffered from several handicaps. The chief executives come on a short term, and the members of the board of directors did not have the continuity. This has resulted in the absence of enterprise-specific culture. Most of the managers come on deputation from the governments, and so were the chief executive officers also. This hampers the process of business development and lack of will to learn and rule of the market. Though these enterprises were created as autonomous entities, they continue to function as departmental enterprises on account of the presence of government functionaries, as both their debt and equity came from the government only. The innovations in business were at a discount in these enterprises because most of which continue to function with the same scheme. These enterprises also suffered from duplication of activities and lack of coordination. For instance, in each district of a state, the scheduled caste or backward caste, women development and tribal corporations functions sometimes competing for the same end. They do not cooperate their activities with one another. This added to the cost of their transactions. In the case of some enterprises, instead of earning profits through disbursal and recovery of funds, the money was put in the banks in fixed deposits, and high rate of interest were earned to show profit earnings. Therefore, these are the major problems that these commercial promotional enterprises and the promotional enterprises and the commercial enterprises are facing. These enterprises, even though these enterprises are facing various problems and challenges,